we are going to be talking about shame today and why you might still or why you might feel shame after leaving a toxic job. And this is sort of like a continuation from I went live last week, which was a great session. If you missed that, it's certainly available now on the podcast, the Fulfilling Career podcast, where I talked about the three things that might be behind your fear of making the wrong decision in your career. Welcome. If this is your first time here watching one of my videos, catching me live, whatever it may be, hello, I am Dr. Tega Edwin. I'm a career counselor and coach, and I help women who are unhappy at work get super clear about who they are so they can find a fulfilling career and job search with confidence. And today I'm going to spend some time talking about why you might still feel shame after leaving a toxic job. Last session, when I went live, I talked about the three things that might be behind your fear of making the wrong decision or the wrong move in your career. And during that conversation, something that women kept talking about was feeling shame after leaving a toxic job or feeling shame at the prospect of leaving a toxic job. And I knew that I wanted to spend some more time talking a bit about that because it's not uncommon. So today what I want to do is talk about why you might feel shame or why you might still feel shame even after you have left a toxic job, right? So it's either maybe the concept of leaving is inducing some shame for you, or you have already left. You've left a toxic job. You are maybe looking for something else, or you're already doing something else, or you're in that transition period, and there's a sense of shame about leaving. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because shame is such a powerful emotion negatively. It's powerful in that shame it will control your decision making. It will hold you back from doing certain things. It will impact how you show up in the world. And so I think it's really important that you understand. So if this is resonating for you, if you are saying the thought of leaving this job is inducing some shame, or I have left and I feel shame, I want us to really spend some time talking about where that shame might be coming from so that you can address it, because it can and is such a powerful emotion. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. I have 5 things when I spent some time thinking about the women that I have worked with in the past, and even just the research, what the research says about where shame might be coming from as it relates to career transitions. There are 5 things that showed up for me that I want to share with you in terms of where that shame might be coming from. Before I start, for those of you who are here live, please engage. I love, so Victoria said it's stormy. Wow, so the rain might be nationwide. But as you're listening, if something is resonating with you, drop it in the chat. Let me know in the chat if something is resonating. If you're watching the replay and something is resonating with you, leave a comment below. If a quote stands out or if a question resonates, type it in the chat, help your neighbors out. But yeah, I am such an extrovert, and so I love to engage with you. And the way I see you engaging is with the comments that you leave below, whether, again, you're watching the replay or whether you're here live. So let's go ahead and jump right in. The first source, I would say, the first source of shame that might be showing up for you is societal expectations. So I think it's important to recognize that as a woman in the world of work, let me back up, as a woman in the world, period, in most societies, women are still very much expected to be nurturing, caring, to put other people's needs before them, to prioritize the needs of other people. And so when you are in a toxic job, a job that is unaligned, it's unfulfilling, it is negatively impacting your health, when you are in that position and you are considering leaving or you have left, what you're essentially saying is, I'm going to prioritize myself and prioritize my fulfillment and prioritize my needs in this situation. I'm not going to stay and let this company keep taking advantage of me. I'm not going to stay and keep suffering for maybe a job that's not even paying me a value-aligned salary. I'm going to go somewhere where I'm seen and valued. That's really what you're saying. And so you are putting yourself first, and doing that in a society that really doesn't like for women to put themselves first. Like, y'all, I know I'm generalizing because there might be pockets of places where women are celebrated in prioritizing themselves, but generally the messages we receive from media, from society, sometimes from loved ones, which we'll come to next, the messages we receive is, as a woman, you are here for everybody else. You are here to take care of your children, your partner, your job, even like your boss, like you are here to essentially serve other people. And so when you walk away from a toxic work situation, you are flipping that script and saying, I'm prioritizing myself. And so what happens is, because of the society we live in, and depending on who is around you, that notion might not be celebrated. People might not celebrate you for prioritizing yourself in your career. As a matter of fact, people might even go to the extreme and shame you for prioritizing yourself in your career. And so that can be one source of shame, is I'm leaving this job, but I'm hearing and seeing messages that, oh, that means I'm not committed, I'm not dedicated, I couldn't hack it out, or I didn't think about other people, I was being selfish. And so when you're hearing those messages, again, people might not say those words directly. It might be indirect. People might say things like, oh, you left that good job. Oh, you didn't give them notice. Or you left them without thinking about what it will cost them. How's your team going to handle it? Or, oh, you didn't care about what that's going to do to your family. Aren't you contributing to your family's salary, income? But like, they might not directly say you're not committed, you're not dedicated, you're not good enough. But the comments they make on the side might make you start thinking, dang, maybe I made the wrong move by leaving that toxic job. Maybe I should have kept prioritizing other people. Maybe it wasn't that bad and I over exaggerated what the situation was, and I could have toughed it out. And so when you hear those messages, again, whether directly or indirectly from society, from family, from loved ones, that can induce some shame for you. Because it can cause you to start thinking that by putting yourself first, you did something wrong. And so you might have left the job, or you might be about to leave the job. And that can lead to you feeling shame, because people around you are giving you, I keep saying media, whatever it may be, are giving you messages that by prioritizing your mental health, you are doing something wrong. And so that is one source of shame. That is one place that the shame might be coming up. Because the other thing that I think is important to even, think about, especially if you're a Black or brown woman, people love the strong Black woman. People love for women to be strong and resilient, which in a work situation, when you're in an unaligned job that is toxic, that usually means stick it out, tough it out. It's not as bad as you think. Right? That's the message we can hear, because you're supposed to be resilient. But one thing I remember I told my students last year I was teaching a class. Yes, resiliency is great. The research is there. It's a great variable for helping you navigate trauma, stress, all of that. And at the same time, being resilient is exhausting. It takes energy and strength to always have to be resilient in the face of a job that is making you feel less than, making you feel undervalued, making you doubt yourself, doubt your skills, doubt your contribution. Having to constantly tough it out and stick it out and be resilient is exhausting. And so I want to, let's just start from there, of when we think about the ideas of women sticking it out or toughing it out, it's not a healthy mindset. And two, that may be the source of the shame that you're feeling around your decision to leave that toxic job. So that's the first source of shame that you might be experiencing. Before I keep going, I like to pause when I'm doing this live, because I love when y'all are commenting. So I want to see some of the comments that came up. I saw some here. Your last job was literally draining you and causing so much harm to your mental health. Thanks for sharing that, Nadia, because, and I talked about this in that last episode I mentioned, being in an unfulfilling career is literally life draining. The research is out there. Check out the last episode on the Fulfilling Career podcast, the 3 things behind your fear of making a wrong decision. I'm going to link it in the replay and in the podcast. But yes, I'm not surprised that you said it was draining you. Thanks for normalizing this type of thinking. My pleasure. And welcome, Deb. Okay, so the second source of shame. So if you are thinking about leaving a toxic job, or you have left a toxic job and you are feeling some shame around that decision, the second source of shame might be the stigma around leaving jobs. So just stigma in general. Because leaving a job is often stigmatizing, especially when you don't have anything else lined up. People rarely celebrate the decision to leave a job. When you leave a job, again, especially if you have nothing else lined up, you're not leaving one job to go directly into another, people can call you flaky. They might say that you were quitting because you couldn't hack it at that job. They might say that you were selfish because you left the job. They might say that you were irresponsible because you left the job. And so there's a certain stigma that comes with just leaving a job in general. And I think that is further exacerbated if you are a woman, especially if you are a woman in a field that is particularly male dominated. Excuse me. Or if you are a racially minoritized individual, so you're not white, and you are in a field that is majorly white in the US specifically is what I'm thinking of. When you're in spaces like that and you leave a job, the stigma that can follow is this sense of, oh, you weren't good enough. You couldn't hack it. You couldn't do the job. You couldn't fit in. And so that type of thinking can lead you to feel shame about leaving the job. Right? It can lead you to feel shame for making that decision of, oh, maybe I wasn't good enough and that's why I had to leave. And then people also there's a certain stigma that's attached to quitting things, where when you quit something, it's a bad thing, right? Like you quit. And so it's like, again, I come back to you couldn't hack it. You weren't good enough. And that has always baffled me because in my mind, it's like, what exactly is wrong with quitting? Like I want somebody to at some point really break that down. Maybe I'll go research it. Because the way I see it, especially when I think of the women I work with in this job, when you're in a toxic job, a job that you know is not serving you, you already know that you're not thriving, you're not doing well. To me, quitting shows a level of self-awareness in knowing that this place is not a good fit for me. I'm not going to thrive here. I'm not going to show up in excellence here. So it makes sense for me to leave so that I can, one, go somewhere else where I can show up in excellence, and two, create space for somebody else to come in and do this job better than I'm doing it. Quitting shows a certain level of self-awareness of what is and is not for you, especially, and I should back up and say, okay, let me back up. It's one thing to quit when you haven't really tried something or put in the effort. But I think oftentimes the reason why I don't like to say that too often is we can elongate the effort period. Right? I think of women I've worked with who will say they knew for 5 years that their job was not a fit, but they kept trying to make it work. 5 years is way too long to try to make a job work. Like if you know that it's not a fit, you often know fairly quickly that it's not a fit. And so quitting shows a high level of self-awareness of this is not a right fit for me. The people here are not treating me with respect. I don't feel valued. I don't feel seen. It's time for me to go somewhere else. And so that stigma of leaving jobs, that stigma that comes and calling you a quitter or a loser, first of all, let me validate your decision for you if you needed to hear it. It is okay to leave. In fact, I encourage people that's why I do what I do. I want you to leave jobs that are not serving you. Because in the long run, staying doesn't help literally anybody. Doesn't help you, doesn't help the company, doesn't help your family. Because when you are in a toxic job, all that negative energy goes with you from the job to your loved ones. You're arguing more. You're not fully present. You're complaining more. Your loved ones are sick of hearing it. And so it's important that you, I think, just check for yourself if you have bought into that stigma of when you leave a job, it's a bad thing, or when you quit something, then now you are a quitter. Meanwhile, quitting is simply it's an action. You left something. It doesn't make you the thing. And so that might be the second source of where you might be feeling shame, is the stigma around leaving a job. And in the live comments, Kay said, yes, so true, but quitting feels like a failure. And I think it's important I think that's a very valid comment. And it's important that you, one, think about how you define failure. What is the relationship you have with failure? And two, think about how you're defining in the relationship you have with quitting. A lot of times, and I've seen this in my work consistently, people are so scared of failing, again, similar to what I just said, because when I fail, it's not that I failed at something, it's that I am a failure. But that's not the truth. You are not the thing. That's number one. Number two, failure is an inherent part of learning. You cannot learn something. You will never become good at something without failing. Point blank period. I saw this once and it always stuck with me. So FAIL, F-A-I-L, that is an acronym. Like if you want to reframe, think of FAIL to stand for first attempt in learning. When you're trying something new, I think about, okay, imagine the child who's learning to walk. And they were crawling for a while, they've been holding on to things, and now they're getting up and they take a couple of steps and they fall. Is the child a failure? They get up, they take another couple of steps and they fall again. Or they have to hold on to a walker to walk, and then they stumble and they fall. Is that child a failure because they couldn't just get up and start running? Does that make them a failure? No. Like when we see kids doing things, we recognize that stumbling is a natural part of the learning process. But for some reason, when we become adults, we need to be perfect at everything the first time we try it. Where's the logic in that? Like literally, logically, it makes no sense. So that's why so many people are afraid of failure, are afraid of rejection, because they internalize it. Like you are internalizing the idea that when I failed at something, I am a failure, but that's not, no. If you failed at something, you have learned. You have learned that this job is not for me. You have learned that I don't like this job. You have learned that I don't like this management style. You have learned that I don't like this kind of work environment. You have learned that I don't like this salary. And so I take that learning and I go somewhere else and I try to do something else. What you do, the way you quit and what you do with the information you learn from quitting is what I think can help determine how you view that process. Right? Like if you look at it as I quit, but I'm learning some things from this experience. What am I taking from this experience? I think that will help you reframe your relationship with that idea of failure. Because failing at things is not a bad thing. It's a natural part of the learning process. Okay? And then the third source of shame. So if you're feeling shame after leaving a toxic job, the third place that shame could be coming from is just self-doubt. That shame could be coming from your own internal self-doubt. And this is it's important, I think, to even start by recognizing that when you have been in an unaligned and toxic job, being in that kind of environment usually invalidates you, invalidates your contributions, and you start to internalize it. I've seen this constantly over time with the women I work with. You start then doubting your own value add. You start asking, do I have skills to do anything else? Do I have value to add in the workplace? Maybe this is all I can do. Maybe I'm not good enough to do anything else. Maybe I should just stay here because I've been here so long. This is all I'm good for. It can cause you to wonder, maybe I don't have the skills. And so when the people around you and the job itself that you're doing has undermined you and criticized you for so long, after a while, you start to internalize those messages. That's just the way your brain works. When you hear something long enough, you start to believe it. That's just the way our brains work. And so when you've been in that toxic situation for a long time, there's a lot of self-doubt that can creep in of, maybe I don't have the skills to do something else. Maybe I'm the reason that I was in a toxic job. Maybe I'm not good at making career decisions. Maybe it's my fault that I ended up in this situation where people were taking advantage of me. Right? You start to internalize a lot of that negative messaging about you and your value add and your worth. And so leaving the job can feel like a validation of all that doubt that you had. Leaving the job can feel like, oh yeah, I couldn't hack it. I really didn't have the skills. I wasn't good enough. And that can lead to shame, right? Because when you leave the job, it can feel like a self-fulfilling prophecy of all the lies that you started to believe about yourself. When you leave, you are now, your brain is telling you that leaving is evidence that all those lies you believed about you are true. And so that can then lead to shame of, I really didn't have the skills. I really didn't have worth. I'm not good enough to do anything else. I don't have the skills to be successful anywhere else. And that's where that shame can come from your own self-doubt. Victoria said in the chat, yes, I start to question my own worth and it's so hard to overcome. It really is. It really is. And it's why, back to the other point, I want people to leave jobs that are not serving them as soon as they can. Because the longer you stay in that environment, the worse, the longer you stay in that environment, the harder it becomes for you to overcome all the negative messaging that you've received. because it's conditioning. You are being conditioned to think that you don't have the skills to do anything well, that you don't have value to add, that you're not good enough. Like the longer you stay, you're being conditioned to think that way. And so it makes it even harder to overcome those lies. And it's important to pause here and say, harder does not mean impossible. It's harder to overcome, but it's not impossible. And that's why I want us to have these conversations, because when you start to understand where your shame might be coming from, then you can intentionally address it and try to overcome it. So thanks for sharing that, Victoria. Belanji said, yes, I have been there. I'm not surprised. Like a lot of times, like that's just I think the self-doubt is a natural side effect of being in an unfulfilling career. And so the longer you stay, the longer that self-doubt will seep in and take root in you and in your mind and in your belief systems. And so leaving can feel like a validation of that. The fourth source of shame that you might be experiencing. So I talked about societal expectations, stigma around leaving a job, your own internalized self-doubt. The number 4 place where shame might be coming from is fear. Different kinds of fears. One that might be a big one for you, if you have a family of any kind, if you're supporting people of any kind, if you're contributing to income in a household, the fear of not contributing financially can lead to a shame that you're no longer adding value to that family system, whatever it looks like for you. Leaving the job can feel like you're cutting off a source of income, and cutting off that source of income can now make you think that you are no longer contributing financially. And a lot of us who are in family systems, again, of any kind, we equate our worth and value to the system, to the finance or the money that we're bringing to the table. I mean, it doesn't help when companies, people will literally be like, what are you bringing to the table? Shoot, I'm bringing myself. Me, myself, and I alone are valuable. And then you get my skill sets and my knowledge as an addition. But all that to say, that fear of the financial contribution can be a source of shame. The other fear could be the fear of a career setback. So the idea that if I leave this job, I'm going to be set back in my career, and maybe I am now going to have to start over, or I'm not making the right skills, I'm making a lateral move. That idea of taking a step backwards in your career, that can feel shameful of, wow, I'm all the time and energy I put into my career at this point is just down the drain. And that can lead to you feeling ashamed about the decision to leave that job. And then the last potential source of shame for leaving a toxic job is disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief. So you might not know this, but I'm a licensed professional counselor. So my role is I work as a counselor by training, by practice. And part of that work is working with people with grief and loss. And one thing we often talk about in the counseling research is this idea of disenfranchised grief, which refers to grief that is not traditionally supported by society as being legitimate. So society has this, it might be spoken or unspoken depending on the community you live in, but there are certain things that are widely accepted as being a loss. Maybe a partner dies or car accident, whatever it may be. Certain things are accepted as this was a loss, and you are allowed to grieve this loss. And then there are some other things that when we lose them, they're not widely validated by society as being a loss. And so the idea of grieving that is not supported and it's not accepted. And so now the grief that you might feel from losing a job or from leaving a job becomes disenfranchised because people don't support the idea that you deserve to grieve that loss, especially if you left the job by choice. So when you leave a job, there is a lot of grief that can come with that, because when you lose a job, it's not just the job that you're losing. Again, whether it was voluntary or involuntary. When you leave a job, you're losing your part of your identity. You're losing social networks and community. You're losing a source of income and financial stability. You're losing security. You're losing benefits. You're losing the routine that comes with the job. There are a lot of losses that come with leaving a job that can lead to grief. You are allowed to grieve that old life. You are allowed to grieve even that toxic job. But you might be around people or be in a society that disenfranchises that grief, and they say, why are you sad? You chose to leave. Like, it was your decision. If you didn't like it, you should have stayed in the job. You should have toughed it out. And so when you are not supported in that grief, when you know that people around you think that you're not entitled to that grief, that can lead to you hiding the grief, hiding the loss that you're experiencing, which can then lead to shame. Because you are holding all that grief inward and you feel a sense of, I don't deserve to grieve this loss. And so that can cause you feeling shame. Your fear of being maybe judged or dismissed by people. So people saying, again, why are you so sad? You chose to leave. That can cause you to feel shame. And I think this is one that we often don't talk about. We don't talk about the idea of grief and loss when it comes to career choices and career decision making. But losing a job, again, whether it was voluntary or whether it was involuntary, losing a job comes with a lot of loss that you are allowed to grieve. And the other thing about this disenfranchised grief is that when people around you don't understand why you're sad, like why are you grieving this job, it can cause you to feel rejected, right? And invalidated in your grief. And so again, you try to hide it, which when you're trying to hide your grief, you might stop hanging out with friends. You might stop hanging out with loved ones. You might stop talking to people about it. And so you isolate yourself. You become lonely. And the thing is, isolation always exacerbates shame. Loneliness always exacerbates shame. We do not overcome shame alone. Shame is overcome in community with acceptance from the people around you. And so when you feel that grief from losing your job and nobody around you understands why you're sad, and so you're like, you know what, I'm just not going to talk about it. I'm going to hold this all in. And so I'm going to keep myself away. That can exacerbate feelings of shame for leaving the job. So those are the 5 reasons why you might still be feeling shame after leaving that toxic job. The societal expectations, the stigma around leaving a job, the internalized self-doubt from being in a toxic job, the fear, whether it's fear of contributing financially or fear of career setbacks, and disenfranchised grief. Before I share some strategies to sort of navigate this feeling of shame, those of you who are here in the chat, talk to me. I saw some emojis come through, so it sounds like some things were resonating. So for those of you who are here live in the chat, I want to just pause for a bit. I want to hear what is resonating for you. I want to hear more about those emojis that were shared. What's resonating for you before I share some strategies, and then we'll wrap up. Affirmations by Arabi said, I definitely remember feeling guilt. Yes, guilty about leaving. Yeah, I think the guilt is not abnormal, and people will exacerbate that guilt. And I see you said, and that job was toxic. Yeah, even when it's not serving us, that guilt will follow us. Kay said, definitely the self-doubt and grief. Okay, so self-doubt and grief are 2 that you're seeing as sources of shame. Thank you both for sharing. I appreciate that. So if you're typing, keep typing. I'll come back and look at the chat. Let me share some strategies real quick before we wrap up. I just want to share 3 things for you. If this has been resonating, 3 things to leave you with as you navigate if you are experiencing this shame around leaving a toxic job. The first is just recognize the toxicity. Recognize that you were in an environment that was toxic. Unaligned job, doing work that is not aligned with your abilities, with your values, with your skills, with your interest, leads to increased levels of work stress. And the research is clear. Increased levels of work stress will negatively impact your physical health, your mental health, and your relationships. At the very least, that alone makes that environment toxic. And so if you are in an environment that is negatively impacting your physical health, mental health, and relationships, you honestly have no choice but to leave. And so I want you to recognize that this space was toxic and you had to leave just for your own self-preservation, for your own relationships, for your own mental health and wellness, for your own spiritual health. You had to leave. You had to leave because you deserve career fulfillment. You deserve to enjoy what you do for a living. So that's where I want you to even just start, is recognizing that that space was toxic and the only logical choice was for you to leave that space. The second thing I want to offer you as a strategy is reframe your mindset, right? Because something I saw come up in the chat is just that guilt of what you're leaving behind, maybe what you're giving up, how you're leaving people in the lurch. But reframe your mindset. Instead of thinking about it as what you're leaving behind, instead of focusing on what you're leaving behind and how you left, think about what you're walking towards. Focus on what you're walking towards. You're leaving toxicity, you're leaving dissatisfaction, you're leaving people disvaluing you to walk towards fulfillment, to walk towards operating in excellence, to walk towards making a difference in the world and having impact in the world. Focus on where you're going, because the more you keep focusing on the past and what you left behind, how they treated you, the more that shame will just keep getting bigger. And so it's important that you start looking forward and just reframe your mindset around that choice to leave that toxic job. And then finally, seek support. So I talked about, if you think about some of the different sources of the shame that I talked about, societal expectations, how people might say that you were wrong for prioritizing yourself, disenfranchised grief, or how people might say that you don't deserve to grieve the loss of that job, and self-doubt that can come from people around you saying you're not good enough. All three of those, in fact, even in stigma, right? Stigma from leaving a job. So 4 of the 5 are highly influenced by the people around you. 4 of the 5 sources of shame are highly influenced by the messaging you're receiving from people around what you deserve at work, the choice you made to leave. And so the people around you might be the very reason why you are feeling so much shame around that decision. And so it's so important that you change your circle. Seek support. Get around people who understand that you had to prioritize your health and wellness. Get around people who will validate your choice and validate you deserving to have fulfillment. Get around people who understand the toll it takes on your physical and mental health to stay in an unfulfilling job. Shoot, join my program, Find Your Fulfilling Career. Right? Because FYFC is it's intentionally an intimate group coaching program, because when you are doing work that is unaligned and you have been there for a while and known that the job is not a fit, you can start to feel really isolated because it looks like everybody else around you knows what they're doing. Everybody else around you is successful and nobody gets it. And so that experience of being in an unaligned job, doing unfulfilling work, can be really isolating. And remember what I said earlier. We don't overcome shame in isolation. That is intentionally why my program is a group program, because then you get to be in a small group with other women who understand the journey. They understand what it can feel like to be doing work that is unfulfilling, to know that there's something else out there, something better, but you have no idea what that something else is. And that makes you feel even more shame, because it's like, why can't I figure out my career on my own? That's why my program is a small group program. Because you are already feeling isolated in navigating this toxic job, that you need the support. And also, it doesn't hurt that I'm a licensed professional counselor. And so I understand just the mental health dynamics of navigating the job, the emotional dynamics, the grief, the loss, all of that. And I bring that into FYFC. So when I say seek support from people around you, but sometimes you need to invest in that support. Because again, the longer you keep trying to navigate and hack this by yourself, the more that shame will get bigger, because you are isolating yourself. You're holding in all that grief, holding in all that loss. And so it's going to keep making you feel like you made the wrong decision. So those are some strategies to navigate the grief. And I know I just mentioned FYFC. So if you just go to findyourfulfillingcareer.com, you can learn more about FYFC. Like I said, it's a small group coaching program. I'm always happy to answer questions in the DM, and I'll put links in whatever replays you're watching or listening to. But I've been running FYFC for over 3 years now. And over that time, we've helped over 50 women across 4 continents in over 20 industries get clear about their next career move. And every session is so powerful, because we talk about things like this shame I'm talking about, and family messaging you've received about work, and what people have told you about what you deserve in your career. We unpack all of that while doing the actual strategic stuff of you're following a clear framework to clarify your values, your interests, your skills, and research your potential career options, and then creating your transition plan. Like, that is the whole goal of the program, is we figure out your next career move and create your transition plan. So if that sounds like this kind of support you need, if I've been talking about shame and it's been resonating with you, you're like, some of you said, the self-doubt resonated, the guilt, you said the disenfranchised grief resonated. You definitely need to get into a community that can support you as you navigate your transition. So Kay said, I was let go and I've carried the self-doubt to my next job. I think, so that involuntary leaving of a job can also exacerbate the self-doubt. And so it's important. What I would offer you is to just pause and think about why you were let go. In the sense of, where there's some other dynamics from your picture, I can see that you're a Black woman. And so it's like, were there other dynamics at play where there was some, I just literally lost the word, some oppressive, prejudiced thought processes going on that caused you to be let go? Like, almost, I want you to think about, was you being let go a reflection of your skill set? Or was it a nature of the industry you were in, the company you were in, the management and supervision that you had? Because sometimes when we're let go, yes, it really is because of our own lack of skill set or lack of ability to do the job. And you can always fill that gap, right? You can improve your skill. I always tell my clients, we can always develop new skills. But if you were let go because people were playing games, and we know how they like to play games in corporate, then that means that being let go of was not a reflection of you and your value add. And so I want you to separate your identity from that decision that happened on your behalf. And I see that you said, but I knew I needed to leave way before I was let go. So then it even sounds like part of the reframe for you needs to be, they did you a favor by letting you go. And so there's no reason to feel self-doubt, right? Like, if you knew you needed to go, then them letting you go was them doing you a favor. You should be thanking them for making the choice that you didn't have the courage to make for yourself, because you chose to stay because you were hoping it would get better, or you were afraid, whatever it may be. So they did you a favor. And so I want you to reframe that self-doubt into, thank you for letting me go. Now I can go live my life and experience fulfillment. Victoria said, it's hard to find confidence again after experiencing many of these types of shame. Victoria, I agree. It is hard, but it's not impossible. And that's why I cannot harp enough the importance of getting support and being in a community. That's why, y'all, I talk about my program, FYFC, Find Your Fulfilling Career, so much. I know the power of this program. It is hard to find confidence, which is why you need to be in a group of other women, one, who have experienced it and can support you, but two, you need that expert guidance. Me, in case you're not sure. Like, I've been doing this work for almost 10 years at this point. I've been a counselor. I've been doing career work specifically for over 8 years. I research career work for a living. I do career work for a living. I train other people to be counselors. So when I say I'm an expert, I'm not one of these internet experts out here. Like, legit, I have a PhD in counselor education. I have a certification in trauma, right? So it's hard, but that's why you need support and guidance to help you navigate it and develop that confidence, because yes, I agree, it is hard. Let me see what else is happening in the comments. Okay, I didn't see any other comments come through. I hope that was helpful for you all. As usual, if you ever have any questions about anything, feel free to slide in my DMs. I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you to those of you who are here live. If you're watching or listening to the replay, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Again, if this resonated with you in terms of this conversation around shame and grief and all of that, I can't harp enough on the importance of support and getting in a community. So just go to findyourfulfillingcareer.com and you can learn more about FYFC. Tony said, how often do you go live? I try to go live weekly. Weekly is usually my goal every week. Generally, it's on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. is when I go live. But the past 4 weeks at my job, we've been hiring. And so my schedule has been out of whack. So the past 2 weeks, I've gone live on Wednesday. But usually Wednesday is like a campus day. So actually when I'm done here, I'm going to campus to work. But I aim to go live every week, usually Tuesdays. And I always announce live in my stories. It's why I always tell you how to check out my IG stories, because I will announce when I'm going live beforehand and you can set up a reminder. Okay? Thanks for asking that. Thanks for those of you who were here live. I will catch you on the next episode. Bye, y'all.